All right. So this is Wednesday on the Stoop. It's a weekly program. We're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5, and we have different facilitators each week. I'm glad that you guys are joining us today, and I hope to see you again next week. We have a couple people still kind of filtering in the waiting room, so you might see more faces popping up in the next couple of minutes. But Ted, I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
Sure, cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. It's cool to see everyone here. Some new faces and old faces. So I guess one of the things that I was struggling with for a while after writing a lot of work last year. I somehow managed to pump out a lot of stuff despite the fact that the pandemic was going on, or maybe because the pandemic was going on, I just didn't really have a whole lot to do. So I just kind of spent a lot of time sitting in my room writing. But then everything went blank for a while, and I started thinking, well, what can I do to kind of get myself going again? And I started thinking about the art of Benchi. And do people know what Benchi is, or have like an idea of what that is? So essentially, it's a really interesting practice. At the dawn of the moving picture, the moving image, right? When most of the films were being exported from the United States to other countries, what happened was that in Japan, they had people who were interpreters, essentially, of these films. And so they were called Benchi. And they would sit with like an orchestra at kind of the front of the movie houses where these films were being shown, and narrate the films, kind of give interior monologues of the characters, and do all kinds of, I guess one would say like interpretive acts about what was being shown on the screen. And at one point, there were 6,000 Benchi in the entire country of Japan, which is quite a lot considering Japan's population. And also, the Benchi then started practicing this art for films that were being made in Japan. And they became kind of big stars, essentially, as kind of interpreters and performers. And so this sort of cultural practice, there are still Benchi in Japan today, and it's still something that continues. But it's sort of, with the rise in talkies, which, it kind of seems absurd to be like, oh, the talkie films, yeah, with the rise of talkies, the practice slowly sort of died. And so now it's more kind of one could say it's an oddity, or more of like a cultural practice that's sort of continued by the smaller group of people, right? But one of the really interesting things that happened is that the practice kind of made its way to the United States at a certain point, and particularly in the late 90s and into the 2000s, there were a lot of poets who started essentially using Benchi kind of practices, or doing like kind of a adaptive Benchi, or neo Benchi as some of it was called, to kind of do cultural critique in a way. And so, you know, in some ways you can see what, you know, like there's a residue, I guess, of Benshi in the famous sort of like comedic videos that one can watch online, you know, bad lip reading, like those sorts of videos. In a way, those videos are sort of, part of the Benshi lineage, essentially. But to make a long story short, that was kind of a long explanation of what Benshi is. But what I started doing was I started kind of trolling the internet for short films, not, you know, films that had, that were silent or had non-speaking parts, a lot of like open source stuff, that kind of thing, old Buster Keaton films, all sorts of things, right? And really sort of just writing through them, and I found it to be a really sort of generative practice, and so I started doing it, about once a day or every other day. And, you know, sometimes I would watch stuff and I would be like, wow, this is really racist. I was, like, oh shit, and that would go into the poem. And then sometimes I would watch something and just end up, wanting to fall asleep, and that would, and then sometimes stuff would be really interesting. And so I think that one of the things about it that's really wonderful is that it allows one to kind of write poems that, and like kind of have a stake in another piece of art, and give one's interpretation of it, while also not kind of I guess it sort of like spurs creation without necessarily limiting how the scope of one's creation. It's not forcing one to like think about any specific thing. It's very much open to the writer, the poet, which I think is true in most occasions, but sometimes find like writing prompts a little limiting, whereas when it's a prompt where it's like you're looking at an image, well, everybody's going to focus on something different in an image, right? Ostensibly one would. So I guess that's kind of what the session will be about. And I thought that I would maybe show a couple of little examples, and then what we would do is kind of do 2 Benshi exercises ourselves, and maybe do some sharing. And then that should take up our time. Yeah. Sound good to everyone? Cool. If people have questions or comments or anything, feel free to put that stuff in the chat. I don't really know how the audio thing is working, but I'm going to be sharing my screen a little bit. So one thing I will say is that if you can't hear for this first video, at least, because that's this first video, you'll have to hear what's going on for it to make sense. Then maybe we'll have an issue. But here we go. Boop, boop, boo. Can you all see that? Yeah. Okay, cool. So, and if I go, the magic force field, that's yeah, you can hear that at least a little bit. Okay. So this is David Larson, who is a poet. He did a lot of work with Benshi, and in the kind of the mid 2000s, and he's also a very well-known translator of ancient Arabic poetry. He teaches Arabic at NYU. He's a pretty interesting guy. So This is his version or his Benchi of the 2002 film Troy, the blockbuster. It was kind of a total blockbuster flop. It was a real, it didn't make any money. And so this is his sort of take on that. And hopefully you can sort of get the idea from this, so.
It is the city of Troy, the broad city with wide avenues. It has lofty gates and fine towers. It is a great city, the city of Priam, the Trojan city. Out on a plain deep with rich soil, Troy, the holy city. Sacred, steep and frowning, but a well-built city, comfortable to live in, lovely to look upon. Of the most fearsome horses of the waning Bronze Age, Troy is the loving breeder and noble breaker. It is the clitoral tip of Asia. You don't believe me? That's a Hittite word, Assuwa, for the windy northwest corner of Anatolia, where stood gleaming Tanawissa, the Hittite word for Troy, the well-carpeted, high pavilion, and overcome with love for Helen, the entire municipality and its environs, now wooded with men, all weep for the love of her, who surveys them from the high walls. Whatever makes us all worthwhile, she is it. She stands there for 60 seconds exactly, which you would know if you were sitting there with me, watching and rewatching this scene from Troy, wearing out the remote control. That's Paris on the right, the dreamy abductor. His brother's trying to tell him something. Yeah, whatever. To be back in my perfumed bedchamber, trading pearls with Helen for white diamonds on a terry cloth. Out here on the battlefield, I find they weigh me down. That look, though, 2.5 seconds. Get back here, Helen, croaks Peter O'Toole. You're making the men wet. My high-spirited, overweening, insolent, great-hearted men of Troy are feeling those white arms of yours like, ooh. So Paris, listen. Your whole community stands staring off into space, not knowing exactly what's coming, but loving still what caused it. The whole abduction narrative, I thought I could be left out as I lobbed Mycenaean meatballs at you about King Priam as the template for the stereotypical Eastern despot. But instead, I find this naughty story of a city laid waste for the misdeeds of one errant prince, and this is our view over the balcony of the bristling death brought on top of Troy. Gods in the movie are hardly seen. Only this viral torrent of men oozing up the beach at Cabo San Lucas. Not even in a dream could you see this many. Not in full armor like this, marching with the sun upon their backs, after it was on their faces at the beginning of the long take. If you can call this a long take, more like a digital painting, really, of a shambling, streetless city of death to what is most beautiful in the world to me, and that is the freedom to take a lover from whomever I choose. Even an old war horse twice my age if she's hot enough. Yeah, I know I've let you all down. I'm real worked up about it. Remember, though, my papa took 50 brides, and ever since I was a babe, all my decisions have been based on pure fear.
So you get the idea. He's quite a performer. And I'm gonna exit full screen here. But I think that one of the things that's interesting about his performance there and the way Benchi works in general is the fact that a lot of the neo Benchi is doing the same sort of work that older Benchi was doing. It's interpreting, right? In a way, it's interpreting and re-narrativizing a work that's already kind of been narrativized. And so in a way, it gives the performer of the Benchi a lot of room in which to sort of move around in, to move through sort of critique and humor and more lyric sentiment and etc. So I think that that's, in a way, it's almost a very specific type of ekphrasis, which is looking at piece of art and sort of forming one's impression or using that as sort of a jumping off point for one's own writing. And I guess that I found it, I find it to be a pretty interesting practice. And so I think that one of the things that sort of poses a problem is that, you know, how, you know, what I was like, when I was thinking about how we should do this workshop today, I was like, well, what sort of work are people interested in? You know, I don't know if I want to show like some sort of, you know, contemporary blockbuster film, and also that would probably get Blue Stoop into trouble, right? But what I thought we could do is there's a scene, you know, that's kind of one of the classic scenes of old-timey cinema, and that we would do a little exercise to that, and then we would see if we had time left and do an exercise that was a little bit different, and that latter exercise involves actually more of a slideshow, because I think that for some reason the slideshow as medium also can lend itself to this sort of work, and it's a very different thing than the moving image, but it has a sort of similar position, at least in my mind. So I'll share my screen again, and this time you don't need to hear anything, so don't worry if you can't. Okay. Oh, skip ads. I'm sorry. No, skip that one too. Sorry, I didn't realize it was gonna be a little, okay. So, some of you will probably recognize this scene, Safety Last. It's one of the more famous scenes of the early silent pictures. And I thought that what we could do is, you know, basically watch about the last 5 minutes or so of this, 5-6 minutes of it. And then, actually, I don't know, maybe we should watch the whole thing. Yeah, why not? I think that the whole thing is only 10 minutes. Does that sound okay to everyone? To like have a nice little 10-minute breather? Yeah, so we'll do we'll play the whole thing, and when it's over, we can have a little talk about like how it felt for you, the process of watching it and writing while watching it, and sort of doing a critique on it, or doing any sort of writing that you want to be doing around it. And then maybe if anybody wants to share, we can do that. And if we have time left, we'll go from there. Sound good? Cool. All right. So again, I feel like maybe there's some strings in this, some sort of old-timey music. So we'll see. Yeah, here we go. Oops. Okay. So, yeah, pretty classic session or film there. I tried watching that whole film once. It's about an hour and a half long, and it's really very complicated, the story, in a way that I'm not totally sure I can do it justice. All I know is that the protagonist that we see at the end there is in love with the woman that we see at the end, and her father doesn't want him to be. I don't know. It's all very, typical, but pretty interesting. So, yeah. How did people find that as? I mean, it's the sort of thing wherein, like, because it's so old, it has its own. I guess everybody can have their own approach to it, right? So how do people find that that sort of writing to it?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was I found myself like sort of like trying to find my footing because I think when you're writing, it's sort of like it is like a testing out of what is actually going on. I think it's different from like the image because the image like pretty much everything is there, but here it's like you're sort of trying to find like where your I is like and then hook on to that. And so I think it took me a while to like find out like where is like my interest inside this atmosphere and then like writing towards that. But it was really interesting because then all the different twists and turns and how it shapes how that interest moves like throughout the movie.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a really and that it's interesting that you mentioned that, Kerwin, because I think that's one of the reasons why I find that doing it to films, or doing it with like shorter films that I can watch like a couple of times actually is a really is something that I've done a number of times, like 2-minute long films, right? And so that's another way that one can, because then you can kind of find your way in and then watch it a couple times, right? And it's not something that takes a whole day, to do. So I think that's a really interesting comic. I feel like that is something that I've definitely run up against too. But it is cool how it the twists and turns sort of like allow you to your way in to move and change too. Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts about it?
Well, I was very entertained. So as I was writing, I feel like I shifted through kind of like narrating what's happening and then just putting my reactions. Like a lot of the times I wrote, well, this is stressful. And I'm like, so I feel like I went from like thinking of like what's actually happening and then me thinking like the character and then me just writing how I'm feeling. So that was an interesting exercise.
Totally. And I think that's one of the cool things about it is that there is that because you're kind of you're able to try to get in the head of the character, right? But then also be still within your own kind of like writing space, right? It allows you a lot of sort of different vectors and like ways in to the poem or whatever sort of thing that you're writing, right? Because you can think from point of view of a character, you can think from your own point of view, you can even include like I really like in that one I love the phrase ditch the cop, because who doesn't want to ditch the cop, but but that's kind of the phrase that I really like kind of using that's actually like on screen, right? So there's all kinds of different methods. Yeah, totally. Anybody want to share anything that they wrote? I mean, it's cool if not. I just like to offer it up as something like or something that stuck out to them from what they wrote.
I'll read something.
Sure.
It's in the scene where you see the edge of the clock in the shot, and then to save himself, he changes the time, dismantles the clock, time clock, clock in, clock out.
Oh, yeah, clock in, clock out. That's a good one. I dig that.
Wait, can I just say, Amy, that was amazing. Literally at that scene, I wrote, "Okay, little monkey," like that. Very different ends of the spectrum. I love it.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I wrote something like time out of mind, poor construct, and I was like, oh yeah, like because it's so like, what kind of clock like that, like on an old building like that would come apart so easily? That's always what I think about when I'm like, man, this is ridiculous. That's one of the joys of those old films, right? Is that all those props were so flimsy and whatnot, so yeah, pretty cool. Thank you, Amy. Good to see you. Any other folks want to share? Cool. All right. Well, just shout in the chat, and I'll also put my email address in the chat if you want to email me anything that you wrote during the session. I'd be happy to read it. So the next thing I mentioned is something that I find actually maybe addresses some of what Kerwin was talking about, and kind of having finding time in to find a way in or something, and because of the nature of the moving image, and because so often things are moving so fast, it can take a little it seems almost diametrically opposite to poetry, which in some ways is like, one could call it a contemplative or meditative practice, right? It depends on every person, right? But that's kind of one of the ways that poetry is often construed. So for me, one of the ways that I ended up starting to kind of do this is that I started like looking for weird slideshows of like people's vacations, or like of like classic like classic photographers and stuff like that on YouTube, and started slowing them down. So a lot of times you can slow down things on YouTube. I don't know if y'all know this, but you can choose to slow them down. So I thought that one thing we could do is go exit out of this guy. So there's a classic photographer, Vivian Maier, who did a lot of street photography. And so this is, here's if you go to the little toolbar setting or tool thing setting on YouTube, on videos that allow you can change the playback speed. So here, what I did was, I think that it's a really interesting thing to sort of have like a couple of minutes to like focus on a couple of photos, right? So what I'm gonna do, if y'all think it's a good idea, I think that it would be kind of neat to essentially do, maybe I'll play this for about 2 minutes. We'll go through like 3 or 4 photographs. I think it probably will go through, and then I'll go back to where we started, and we'll do it again. And that way you get 2 kind of passes through, right? And you can get maybe a new perspective on the photograph a second time. So so it is a different sort of thing, but this is also like sort of a related to Benchy, and a lot of poets have used this sort of slideshow format as like a way of spurring their own work. So yeah, I'm gonna go to about, let's go to the bum. If it'll go there. There you go. Okay. So I mean, Vivian Maier, a lot of the street photography is, I will say, it's dealing with kind of some scenes of pretty abject misery. So just fair warning, pretty heavy. But yeah, let's go to this, and I'll just run through it for. I'll time it for about 2 minutes, and then we'll just go back to the first image and start over again. Cool. Okay, so starting over. Sandwich Man. Okay. Right, so it's like a totally different experience, right? It's like absolutely like night and day for me, and I find that I like both in completely different ways. That doing working in this way with more moving images, I tend to be a little bit more like aware of how those images play out within like broader cultural spectrums or something like that. Whereas for some reason with the still image and moving through a bunch of still images, there's something wherein I find it to be much more, I'm able to settle more and think about like the deeper kind of nuances of what each image kind of represents and how it's composed, and its sort of multiplicities of meaning. So how did other people find it?
I think the music of the first piece, it made it difficult for me to feel like I had space or to find the space. I'm sure it's something that with time. So this felt more, I think you used the word meditative earlier.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was a little bit more of a chance to either accept the rhythm that was there or to create my own rhythm within it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I feel like that's yeah, that's a really lovely comment. I feel like the music, I left the music in because I feel like in like a typical benchy space, right? Like a lot of times they'll be doing this narration while an orchestra is playing or something, you know? And so I thought that, you know, it would be interesting to see how people worked with the music, or like thought about the music. But I think that that is interesting, especially because I don't know if y'all noticed, but I did put silent. I like there actually was sound in that slideshow, but I was like, I don't like this, and so I turned it off. So I was a little. I kind of felt the same way that you did, and wanted some silence, at least for that section. I'm not sure why, but yeah, cool. Any other thoughts, or anybody want to share anything?
I can share.
Sure. Yeah.
Are you gonna play it, or is it gonna be like a thing?
Yeah, yeah, I'll play it.
I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to. I just.
No, I will. I think that that's a great idea. Yeah.
Let's see. This is experimentation. Here we go.
All right. So just give me a 1, 2, 3, and I'll start it. All right.
Okay, I'll give you 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Oh, I need to share my screen. Hold on. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all right. It's all right.
Okay. There you go. Share screen. There you go. Okay. All right. Now give me a 3, 2, 1, and we'll got it. We can get it.
All right. 3, 2, 1. An eye is a tool, part of a system of body. An eye is a tool, part of a system of society. What do I choose to see? What do I not? To see is an act, a practice. Best not to let it rot. What am I called to witness? What might I want to obscure? Every time I bend a knee, survey the plane, pick an angle, I make a choice to see. That's all I got. That's all I got. Cool.
Yeah, that was great. The angles in this one are dope. And so I'm glad that that's this, the more I look at this is one of those pictures where, you know, the first time you see it, you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then the more you look at it, you're like, oh shit. Like it's really intense. So yeah, that was great. Thank you, Christian. Yeah. So I feel like, you know, one of the things and the ways that you could, that one could like sort of continue this sort of practice, right, is actually, you know, it sounds, you know, if you're wanting to do like poetic memoir type work, that kind of work, is actually just to make, you know, a slideshow of your own, you know, your own camera roll. You know, that's something that that I think could be a really interesting possibility. I have a friend who, what she did is that she took all of the pictures that she took, but this was back in the days of Flickr, right? And this shows how old the story is, right? When everybody was using Flickr. But she took all of the pictures that she decided not to upload to Flickr and did a poem based on kind of the ugly photos, quote unquote, right? And to do like an ugly Benchy or ugly slideshow, right? There are all kinds of different ways that one can do it. And so I just hope that people might be able to, you know, find some new ways to like practice poetry, practice writing through it, because it's a pretty cool and interesting way of I think working and also spurring on creativity. If you're ever like stuck, it's a good way to kind of unstick yourself. So yeah, that's what I got. Thank you all for being here.
Super fun, generative. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You too.